Well, welcome to another Purple Insider Extra from inside TCO Performance Center. Matthew Coller and Sam Ekstrom here, and we just got done listening to Brian O'Neill talk about how he wanted to be here. He wanted to be a Minnesota Viking. He signs a 5-year contract extension. We had waited and waited and waited to see if this would happen, and at the very last minute, right before week 1, Brian O'Neill locked up for 5 years. Sam, I don't think that there's many takes to be had here. He is a good player that the Vikings drafted and developed and has become the leader of the offensive line. It's hard to say anything other than good move.
Yeah, this was expected, I think, all along, and the fact that it got this close to the season maybe raised a little bit of doubt, and I think that's almost certainly because of all those right tackles that got signed on the market. Ramczyk, was it Moten, and then it was Braden Smith, I believe, were the big three that kind of raised the value, so that worked out well for O'Neill. We haven't seen the terms yet, but I'm guessing he signs a pretty lucrative extension here that keeps him through the team through presumably 2026. That's a nice chunk of change that Brian O'Neill probably gets to pocket, and he was good as a rookie. He backed it up with a good second season, and he proved he can be consistent in his third season. There's no reason not to invest in that kind of talent when you have an expensive quarterback that needs to be protected and you have a lot of question marks on that offensive line.
Right, there's a very important part of this that he has been incredibly durable over his career. There have been very few times where we're saying that Brian O'Neill is even on the injury report at all, and so that's an important part of it. And if they eventually down the road in these next few years, because that's what you're thinking about with an extension like this, if they do move on to a different quarterback, you're talking about a foundational piece that you need. And they drafted all these offensive linemen, Garrett Bradbury, Ezra Cleveland, Christian Darrisaw, but those guys are on their rookie contracts. They're still developing as players, where here's a guy who's fully developed, and it solidifies him, I think, as the true leader of this offensive line. We saw that come about throughout training camp, where it used to be Riley Reif, and then Brian O'Neill became that guy. But as you're talking about looking down the road and saying, well, how good is this supporting cast for a quarterback going to be, whether that's Kirk Cousins or someone else, it's very good to be able to say you've got that guy locked in, and eventually I'm sure they'll lock in Justin Jefferson. They've signed Dalvin Cook to a big contract, and I think it gives you these sort of pillars of your offense that you can look at and say, well, we know that that position is going to be set. And I also think, too, that right tackle and left tackle, maybe there's a slight edge these days to left tackle, but when you go through the number of edge rushers that rush off the right side, Danielle Hunter, who Brian O'Neill credited for his development, Khalil Mack, we've seen him rush off the right side, and this is a guy who's going to be tasked for the next few years of continuing to block Khalil Mack. It's very important to be able to sign him long term.
Yeah, and he's proven in a practice setting that he can block Danielle Hunter, and he attributed Danielle Hunter's presence to his development as a player, and he thanked Riley Reif as well. But you know, the high-end right tackles now are getting paid kind of like high-end left tackles. Now, there's not as many right tackles getting paid big money, but I think that seems to be on the way in this league. And this is the Vikings' plan sort of beginning to come to fruition, because starting in 2017, they started drafting offensive linemen very high in the draft. First 3 rounds every year since then. Elflein didn't work out. Brian O'Neill was their next stab, and that's worked out. They've now locked him up long term. And I think the goal there is to find 2 or 3 staples that you can invest in. Next in line would be Garrett Bradbury. This is a sort of option year for them. Will they pick up the 5th-year option based on what we see this year? He's sort of the next one, I think, to get considered for that contract extension. Probably needs to do a little more this year to get there.
Right, for sure. A pivotal year for Garrett Bradbury. Now let's talk about a couple of the things that we have been talking with Mike Zimmer and so forth about. One is Anthony Barr's status, where we saw Anthony Barr going out there for a walkthrough this morning, and Mike Zimmer cautiously said, like, he's doing good now, but hey, you know, ask me tomorrow and it might be different, and that's how it's been with Anthony Barr. What do we feel like the difference will be in facing Cincinnati's offense if Anthony Barr is in or if Anthony Barr is out?
Well, it's obviously a huge benefit when he's in, and they basically have shut him down for 3 weeks. So they're hoping that, you know, everything fires correctly. He feels good tomorrow after doing some work today. Whether I'm guessing it's going to be in a limited capacity, probably not full go. today. But without Anthony Barr is the true concern, because we don't know who the third linebacker is. It could be Blake Lynch. It could be Troy Dye. That's unclear. The team's depth chart had Blake Lynch, number 4, I believe. So, and that's someone who has but did he get 2 career starts in his rookie season? Not a lot of experience. So that's obviously a concern. And that, that opens things up maybe for Joe Mixon. If Joe Mixon can get to the second level, you've got a couple guys that aren't very good tacklers trying to bring him down. That could be a problem.
Well, I think one of the most important parts, too, is that Joe Burrow gets the ball out very quickly. Mike Zimmer talked about that a couple of different times when discussing Joe Burrow. That means a lot of quick passes, using the middle of the field. And this is where, when you look at the numbers for Anthony Barr, coverage numbers from PFF or something like that, it's always hard to tell the throws that weren't made into someone's coverage. And Anthony Barr has been very good during his career at passing things off or reading plays or getting in passing lanes and things like that to prevent those throws underneath. So if he's not in there, there's probably a pretty big drop-off in just the knowledge and the instincts and understanding of the game from Anthony Barr to Nick Vigil, and then you have to have someone else call the defense as well. So a lot of things sort of happened there. Wanted to ask you about your opinion, Sam, on Joe Burrow, because Mike Zimmer had a lot of good things to say. He talked about his toughness, and you could say, oh, he's going to say nice things about every quarterback, but this is Mike Zimmer. So he doesn't always. But when it comes to Joe Burrow, it seemed like he was very impressed with what he saw, including about his playmaking ability. I think that Joe Burrow has a bright career, assuming he can come off of this injury. But coming off of the injury to week 1 and facing a defense that has a lot of firepower in the Vikings, I think is going to be a tough task for Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I think so too. A lot of his traits, I think, translate kind of well to having to improvise a little bit, like making plays with his legs, just being generally competitive. But when push comes to shove and he has to stand in the pocket and try to make a throw against this defense with that knee that he has to trust now, I think that's going to be a little bit difficult kind of in his first full-speed game back from this injury. He's going up against a secondary that should be communicating pretty well, a defensive line that's going to have fresh legs and rushing at him pretty hard. I think it is going to be tough for Burrow, and again, that's why you lean on Mixon. If Joe Mixon gets shut down, and that's a big job for Michael Pierce, Dalvin Tomlinson, if they can kind of do their job against Mixon and make Burrow one-dimensional, then I think the Vikings take a stranglehold on this game.
And I think the word of the week is chemistry on both sides, because there's so much turnover on both of these rosters that the Cincinnati defensive line is different, the Cincinnati defensive backfield is different, and the same for the Vikings. So that's it for us. Make sure you listen to our longer conversations. We made our 21 predictions for the season. I don't know if we got through all 21, but we made a lot of them on the podcast. Also, Scott Studwell, Vikings legend, joined the Purple Insider podcast. Make sure you check that out, purpleinsider.substack.com, for a full rundown of everything with Brian O'Neill's contract and much more. We'll catch you later.